If you got a bumper, then shake it, vibrate it, embrace it. If you wanna be